Thanks for being here. Thanks for staying with us. This is the third and final panel of today, and I'm moderating it, would you believe? I'm not just the MC, I'm double jobbing today, like most artists in Ireland. And we're going to be talking about making it work, because although we are the next generation across various disciplines, we're still out here making it work all the time, and we're going to be talking about the personal approaches that we have to our practice. So because it's the last panel, we're trying to fit a lot in, and I've got 9 artists in total that you're going to meet and that you're going to hear from. So I've decided, in my great wisdom, to split the conversation into 2 halves. In the first half of the conversation, we're going to talk about the beginnings of a process. We're going to talk about new idea generation, how we find leading ourselves in our work. And then in the second part of the conversation, we're going to talk about final stages. We're going to talk about bringing projects to completion, presentation, sharing with audiences, and then obviously critical reflection and moving forward. One of the great things about Next Generation for me, which was referenced earlier in panel 1-2, was that as part of the award, you were given a residency to go to Amna Walayat, and within that residency, you were introduced to many different artists from different disciplines, and you got to share very casually around the table what you do, who you are, and what you're up to. And it was a really, really nice way to connect with other artists that are working in Dublin and working in Ireland. I think often we don't get the opportunity to connect across disciplines. So in the nature and in the spirit of Amna Walayat, we're going to try and keep this as round table-y as we can. So it's a conversation. And at the end, after the second group, we'll open up the conversation to the rest of you guys in the audience as well. So before we get started properly, what I would like us to do is to introduce ourselves. You might say your name, you might say your discipline, you might describe your practice a little bit, and if you want, but you don't have to, you might talk about your intention when applying for Next Gen. So I'll start. I'm Shaun Dunne. I'm a film and theatre artist, but I was the Next Gen recipient in 2020 for film. My practice is a mixture of documentary and inspired fiction, which basically means that I do a lot of interview, I gather a lot of testimony, but then I blur that testimony with fiction and with inspired narrative. And my pursuit is kind of the relationship between the real and the inspired, the fiction. That kind of combination is something that I'm really, really preoccupied with, and something that I spend a lot of time focused on. So I might go now to Gavan.
I didn't think I was next. I thought you were going to go that way. I thought I had a little bit more time. My name is Gavan Ring, and I'm an opera singer. I'm also somewhat of a musicologist, and I'm the artistic administrator of Drogheda Classical Music. And before I go on, can I just say what a privilege it has been to be here today. It has been absolutely marvellous. So the lion's share of my work involves operatic performance as a soloist at home here in Ireland and abroad. And in between, I do many Arts Council applications. And, I think as regards my musicological work, I've very much been inspired, or I suppose directed towards unearthing or rediscovering forgotten operatic works in the Irish language, and that's what my doctoral thesis was about. And I've sort of stayed on that boat for a very, very long time. Lots of people know they're probably sick of me being on that boat at this particular point, but that's been my shtick, I suppose.
Thanks, Gavan. Niamh?
My name is Niamh Campbell. I'm a writer, mostly novels, but also non-fiction and academic writing. I would say that we were trying to remember if we were 2016 or 2017 recipients of Next Generation. I think it was 2016, but we got our Amna Walayat trip in 2017, so it was confusing. But it was the second round, or the second iteration of the first year. And I applied for it at the time because I wanted to quit my job and write. And that was the only way I could see that I could manage to make that work. And I was finding it very difficult to write or even think straight in the job that I was doing. And it was successful, and I did do that. But it meant that when I got the money, I had given myself 12 months. I could live on it. When it ran out, I went onto the dole. But I had 1 year to get an agent and sell the book. And I did. So it rescued me from having to get another job for a while and changed my life, really.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, good. My name is Jonah McGreevy. I was one of the 2018 recipients from Circus. My practice is I'm an acrobat. I do doubles acrobatics on the ground and in the air. And I guess my whole practice is about creating site-specific works of circus. So we do a lot of works in the woods, in old abandoned buildings, and on the street. And so my focus is always about trying to create an experience for an audience.
And my name is Amna Walayat, and I'm from Cork. I'm Pakistani born, and when I came here, I requested Shaun to please start from there. So, so it's on my special request. It's no biases, nothing, no discrimination. So it's on my special request. So yeah, I'm a visual artist, and I was quite engaged in my art practice when I was in my country, Pakistan. And I was a curator of National Art Gallery there. I had a very bright career, but after marriage, everything I have to leave. I was doing my PhD there, and I couldn't finish my thesis. And so I'm a returning artist back to my career after 12 years break. So this personal approach, this project, like manifestation, I think I'm most appropriate person in a way to speak on this platform, because my project or my practice is totally very, very personal. It's hybrid cultural experience, though it's personal, but I think it's fits with the global voices of the feminist. And I don't know, I try my best to stay away from feminism, but automatically it comes in my practice. And this is, I think I'm bound to, because for 12 years, I was not getting any opportunity as a mother. But I lived in UK for 2 years, 4 years in France, but Ireland was the place where I decided not to continue my practice, think myself as a mother only, and a lot of failure attempts, I decided not to continue, but I think I made a last try, and I get supported by the Art Council Ireland, and now I am on many platforms, and it's thank you, I'm here today even, so yeah. So it's personal approach, my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So to kick us off, I'd love to talk a little bit about time. I think as artists, we're always talking about time. We always need more time. And when it comes to talking about how you make it work, actually talking about time is quite a sensitive thing, because how you spend your time as an artist is deeply personal. And I think we're under pressure a lot of the time to perform this activity and this constant stream of productivity, and sometimes nothing happens for a long time. So I'd love to start with you, Niamh, because as a novelist, I think for a lot of people, the time that it must take to write a novel, even a short story, seems very, very expansive. And when you're starting off at the start of a process, I'm wondering, how do you go about structuring your time? What's the starting steps?
Well, I've written 2 novels, and I'm working on the 3rd, and in each case it's been a little bit different. But I would say that what's common to all of them is when I start a novel, I have a set of ideas and suspicions and images and theories, but I don't like plot. So I never have a plan for the book, and I never know how it's going to end. And soon, if I knew, I would lose my interest in it immediately. So it's very, very exploratory. So the time needs to be very open-ended. Less for the labour of putting the words down, because I actually do tend to do not very many drafts. Sometimes there's scenes in my novels that were only ever written once, and they were never touched again. But there's a lot of time spent percolating, and that. With my first novel, I got sent to Anna Makela. I had been in academia until then, and I was working as an administrator. I'd never hung out with artists or musicians or anybody who lived through it or had gone to art school and trained, and was very comfortable living a life where you needed to take time to think, to meditate, to walk, to do nothing, to be depressed, to eat, to be cared for, to be poor, to finally come up with it. And to take that completely seriously as a way of being in the world, like it wasn't stupid and you didn't have to explain it to anybody. I'd never seen that happen. And I started consciously mimicking that when I went back home. So I would write a bit every day. I would cycle my bike around. I learned to meditate. And I had a lot of romantic intrigues because I had a lot of open evenings. I also volunteered at a few things as well so I could keep busy. But I was able to do this because I was young and had no dependents, and I lived in a cheap house share, and all I needed was a bike and a Tesco order once a week. That changed as I moved on, because after I finished that, I got a fellowship, and I wrote my second novel while doing a postdoctoral fellowship And I really wrote the novel rather than the book that I was supposed to write, because the novel sort of took over and became the research project in itself. So I was still having a practice that involved a couple of hours of writing, then a lot of time walking, note-taking, going to art, see art, a lot of exhibitions, going to the theatre, going to the to exhibitions. Anyone who's read my second novel will know that everything I saw in that year went into the novel, because I just put it straight in as I went. And that turned out to be a very good way of... I like using other art forms in my work as portals to subconscious reflections that are underneath the level of the text, and I really like doing that rather than plot. So what I needed was quite a lot of luxurious time. The third novel is in a completely different place because I both have a full-time job now, I'm a lecturer, and I had a baby this year. And I would say I could talk for a long time about the effect of having a baby on the identity, because it's a full, for me anyway, a very slow, painful ego death over the course of a year when I completely lost my confidence as a writer for quite a long time. I don't think I'm alone in this experience, but it's strange that a loss of confidence should be what happened. And a lot of shame, feeling like everything I'd ever done before was a fluke and I would never do it again. And when it came back, it's in a totally new form. There isn't the time to do it. It's got to be more or less one draft. So the percolation happens in media res. It happens during the day when I'm doing everything else. When I go back to work and have a baby, I wonder about how this is going to be. But I spend a lot of time doing things that are not writing that are to do with the writing. So I still do a lot of meditating. I do a lot of what my dreams goes into the work. I sort of harvest what's going on around me, and I do a lot of walking. And that is really what I need the time for just kind of nullity. I've been able to safeguard that up until now, but I'm kind of waiting to see how I manage to do it going forward, if I can. For instance, last night, baby woke up at about 3, and I decided to make a coffee and stay up and wrote for about an hour. And in that time, managed 500 words exactly, almost, whereas I used to be able to do 1,000 words in one go. So I'm exactly half capacity that I was before I had a baby. And funnily enough, I'm the kind of person who can go to sleep after having a coffee. So I went back to bed. Now, I could maybe do this every second night, but it's like slowly building it in. But if you're going to give yourself just 1 hour every 2 days, you can't be, unprepared. You need to have been really percolating it for a while just to get there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, Niamh, obviously now there are 2, and the time is split in half because of that. But is, in your practice, are you, like, obviously there's a lot of time spent alone. Mm-hmm. Is there time at any point in your writing process where you're calling in other people? Or are you always kind of with yourself and the page?
I'm always with myself and the page. When I got my award, there was no mentorship built into it, and I never looked for mentors. And it sometimes surprises me that people think of that on their own. It didn't occur to me, which is partly arrogance and partly because I just am quite a solitary person. But when I bring people into it, is really, there's a small number of people I would discuss it with, very small. But like I said, when I met the artists and saw how they lived in the world as a community, that I see as kind of me sharing it. I'm not sharing my work, but I'm sharing my kind of energy or my perceptiveness, my sensitivity. But so one of the things you're saying is when is a work over? My novels are finished when my editor says they are finished. Otherwise, I would just keep going. So I have a very good editor with a publisher that I've been with, and she is a London-based, fast-moving, ambitious Londoner, and I am a very slow-moving geek. So when she gets it, she's sort of like, great, I love it, I love this, I don't like that, cut that, do you want to do that? I need a scene to explain that. And we do a kind of da-da-da-da. And that's how it becomes a off-the-counter thing in the world and not just a thing in my head. But it is extremely solitary, yeah. I mean, whether or not this is good or bad, I mean, maybe I would be a happier person if I wasn't so solitary, but I've always done it really, really very much alone.
Because I often wonder, like, just across disciplines, like, from a theatre perspective, like, I feel like there's a huge community, and I think we refer to each other quite a lot, and we're quite connected just by proxy of how theatres work. But I often really wonder, with people who work in literature, what is the community like? What is the exchange like? And does that come into the beginnings of your process when you're working on a new piece?
I think that writers are tricky people, actually. I think that I think the community is something you only enter once you have a professional identity. Because before that, you're not really, people don't know who you are and they don't care. nor should they. Who are you? But I don't share my work with many writers, and I don't like always commenting on other writers' work. I think maybe when people in writing talk about community, they sometimes think of clique, and they think that community is going to accelerate their career in material ways based on who you know, and that is not true. And they're often disappointed to learn that. So I do sometimes have people who seem to think I'm going to do something for them that I can't do and wouldn't do. In terms of like mentorship and reading and sharing, I found myself, only speaking for me, it's more about managing lifestyle, energy, psychological health, and being edited by various people in small journals. So there's a degree of collaboration there, but no, my sense of theatre, I was learning that from hanging around with people who did other practices, that they were so much more comfortable with collaboration and with submerging themselves into a group. I think with writing, I say about having a baby and ego death, this is so important because writing is a hugely egotistical thing. You need to be very egotistical to do it, because often only you believe you can do it, and your writing persona is like a projection of yourself that you have to be protective of, especially if you draw on your life in your writing, because you're going to get questions about it and you have to have like a boundary. So I think my relationship with ego is kind of important and necessary, and that means it's not as easy for me to... I can't imagine writing theatre collaboratively. I think that would, for me, probably be a great development in my personal character, but I would probably find it very hard.
Artistically, yeah. Yeah. Gavan, I'd love to talk to you there, because we were just touching on this idea of solo work, and you referenced that you perform solo quite a lot in your opera singing. I'm wondering what that experience is like, but I'm also wondering about the time between performance. Yeah. And I'm wondering about how you stay warm, or how you kind of keep yourself feeling like you're engaged in your own practice, because from what I understand about opera as an industry, there can be some gaps.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, opera is a kind of or being an opera singer is a kind of a funny one in that regard, because you're at once a soloist for concerts and recitals, and even, let's say, if you're working on a new piece, let's say with a composer or something like that, but as in terms of the delivery of the piece, you're on your own in that regard. But simultaneously, if you're working on an opera with people, which is obviously a piece of theatre, it's a collaborative process. The kind of strange thing about being an opera singer is that you can spend, and I'm sure this is probably true also for theatre practitioners and actors, in that you will spend anything up to 2 years on your own in preparation for a particular role. Particularly, let's say, if a role is not quite yet ready for you, you may have to engage in a process of development. And sometimes that process of development can be years in advance. You know, and you're not necessarily preparing it for a particular professional engagement. You could say at, age, 31, I'm going to hopefully sing the role of, say, Rodolfo in Puccini's La Bohème. And it could be 8 or 9 years of preparation and work on that role before you actually do it, because you have to wait for your physiology also to catch up. Mm-hmm. So there's this kind of a weird tightrope that you have to walk as an opera singer, and you're very much focused on and in tune with how your body is feeling, because obviously producing an operatic sound it's kind of athletic in a way, because you have to sort of train your body and your voice to be able to sing out over 50 or 60 musicians playing at once. And that's no mean feat, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So there's an awful lot of, let's say, physical kind of growth that you have to sort of submit to. Like, for example, I was a baritone for the vast majority of my career, but my voice changed after about 10 years. In my early 30s, instead of, let's say, becoming more sort of meaty and baritonal, it became higher. And that's not an uncommon phenomenon for a male voice to sort of mature that way in their early 30s. So I had to stop what I was doing as a baritone and then completely start again, as it were, and learn a whole new sort of batch of repertoire. And so, yeah, look, I suppose the main thing really, it's funny, Niamh was talking about sort of the abdication, or talking about the ego. The thing about it is you're working towards something collaborative, but you're doing it in a way which is very soloistic. And then when you get into the collaborative space, let's say to rehearse or something like that, you have to sort of abdicate that ego, or you have to neutralize it in some way, because every production is a brand new bunch of people, and you're expected to be straight away on it and getting along with them as if they've been your best friends for life. And that's not necessarily easy all of the time. And the way that I find that you can sort of maybe negotiate that is I suppose to kind of put your ego to one side. Not all of it, because you need to be extroverted, but some of it so that you can sort of listen and collaborate with people. And that's what I find as well, is kind of like, coming back to your question of how do I stay warm? It's that sort of, I guess, that continuous development or of one's awareness of one's sort of physiology and the body, and being and sort of being in tune with it, as it were. And that can manifest itself in all sorts of different sort of, you know, practical kind of things that you can do, which I won't bore you with today, but that's kind of the kernel of it.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Gavin. And just speaking to that point around being solo and then being a part of a group, in terms of your work, Jonah, I know, like, obviously you generate a lot of your own work, your own material in circus and in performance, but you also work for other people and for their productions, and you come in at a later point to help them achieve a project that they've been probably ruminating on for a little bit longer than you. I'm wondering about, at the beginning of a process, what is the difference between Jonah in the first version and Jonah in the second? Like, what you pulled on differently?
It's a good question. I think, like, my own work, I think you can be way more ambitious. Like, the way we would develop work is doing an experimental week. We try to get everything in the room and try to put together a show and get it to a point where we can actually show it, and then figure out everything that's wrong with it, and then come back 2 months later and do the same thing again, where we get everything in a room. We actually are trying to put together scenes, put together a show, and see what's wrong with it, and then slowly build a show over a year or a couple years. And working on other people's projects, you really have to manage the fact that there's lots of different departments, and that you can't make calls. Like in circus, rigging is the key when you're doing aerial work, and if rigging sets where a performance is going to happen, it doesn't matter if that doesn't work for lighting, the rigging has to take preference. And when you work in theater or other productions, you have to learn to really let the other departments come in and have control when they need to. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that when you work for yourself, you can really decide which department takes priority in which moment, and when you're working in a larger group, you sort of have to negotiate that kindly.
And coming back to that question around time, do you find, I wonder, that you work quicker in one mode than the other? Like, if you're auto-generating a lot of the work, is that fast for you? Or do you find that if you're responding to someone else's material, that actually the juice can flow a little bit quicker?
No, I think it's definitely easier to make work alone, because you can just go. Like, there's no, there's less negotiation, and you can just go for it, which is way easier.
Okay. And Amna, you work alone quite a lot as well?
Yeah, I think it's more freedom.
Yeah, can you talk to me about the beginnings of a process for you and what that looks like across your practice?
I think it's my application, Art Council application, which I start thinking about. So it's not only the application, I'm thinking about the project as well. So both things are interlinked. So my practice, I think a lot before making any project, because and my projects are interlinked, so it's extension of the previous one. So, and I have to think about my materials, the scale, and the time slot which I am allocating. So if I want to say start, so I have to many times restart for my work, thinking and coming on a very solid idea. And I know, like, being a migrant background, I know the difficulty to articulate the ideas or with the language. So I have learned with the time how to articulate the idea with the visuals to the audience, which is not familiar with my culture, and my practice is not familiar with them. So I'm trying to make a kind of hybrid cultural experience, and I want to articulate my ideas in a way that everybody from any part of the world can understand it. So it's a challenge for me, which I learned through the language barrier. Like being English, it's English speaking, and the accent then. So I want to make my work accessible for everyone, And I know it's very multi-layered, symbolic. There is a tradition which is attached with my artwork, and I want to be very loyal and genuine with that tradition. I don't want to make it very hybrid, so I want to keep it very related to my land, but with the new vocabulary which fits with the contemporary art. And I know the Art Council with this Next Generation Award and the Art Council policy, which says like making great art. So it's always in my mind. So I don't have any pressure to create a work to please someone. So I know the state of the art of my agency where I'm working as a feminist artist. So I know the art scene, general art scene. I'm trying to understand, and I did with like my master's studies and my about 12-year experience. So I know East and West, both kind of connotations. So I try to address on a global level to my issue. And I want to make it an authentic experience for the global world. This is my, like, I'm very much influenced by the policy or inspired by the policy is making great art. It's always in the core of my practice. And the Next Generation Award, this is a big title which is coming on our CV. So we have to honor that too. So it's a big responsibility, pain, genuine. So I think there is so many things which I have to think, start, and work. And yes, most of my work, which are, I would say, they are exotic. Like I have to import so many material because I want to keep it an authentic experience for everyone. Because that language, which I am like trying to get absorbed into Irish culture, I want the people can understand from there. Like my accent is a little bit heavy for you today, maybe, but I want you can understand the language which is coming from the East. Because I have seen, I lived in UK, and I saw there is very multicultural society. I found France a little bit more very hard into the box, so I have seen two differences, and I'm seeing Irish societies getting very changed, being only English-speaking country in Europe. So I think there are so many things which I have to think about making my practice too accessible for everyone, for children even. And I don't want to put artist statement with my work, but this is very much personal thing which I really want to manifest through my work. And I know my paintings are beautiful, very simple, maybe look a little bit comic, but they are stylized. I know all the ethics of my practice. So I have to consider so many things, and it's a huge responsibility as an artist for me.
It's interesting, Amna, to hear you immediately when you were responding. You spoke very quickly about applications, and that, to me, speaks about partnership and the kind of active pursuit that we have as independent artists in finding partnership. And Gavan, you mentioned at the top as well that in between gigs you're kind of working on a lot of applications all the time. I'm wondering a lot, because when we're developing new ideas, we are always looking to secure funding and develop partnership. In terms of applications and how we find them, I would love to know, just before we move on to the next half of the group, what do you need from the Arts Council in terms of application writing and the delivery that you have to give when you're coming to them with a new idea? What would make the application process and system easier for you? Can I start?
Yeah.
So, I really struggle with the deadlines and the structure of the application process. I find it really difficult if an application deadline is coming up after, say, Theatre Festival. I don't have the time to do an application if I'm after presenting the work. Yeah. I don't have the energy, I don't have the bandwidth. Yeah. I'd love us to be looking at like different models, like for example in the UK, where the applications are rolling. I'd love us to try and think about adapting a process like that. I think that would give us way more flexibility, way more agency, and we'd end up writing better applications. And that's so important for our planning and our development.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that as well. I think that's a really, really good suggestion, actually. I mean, a big part of my work, you might or may not be aware of, I'm from Kerry, and a big part of my kind of philosophy as an artist is bringing. I mean, I think it was Marina Carr earlier said nothing was going on in Kerry. She should come down to Carsavine now and then. I know I'm only jesting, but a big part of my whole philosophy over the last 10 years has been to bring as much high-quality art music to Carsaveen as possible. And I've been doing that on a sort of a rolling basis, be it via the Arts Council, Kerry County Council, Creative Ireland, whatever. It would be great to have some sort of a, I don't know, some sort of an initiative like that that allows, let's say, somebody, look at, I mean, track record is a kind of a twee enough kind of term, but where there is some sort of evidence that good things are happening, that there's a kind of a, as you say, some kind of a rolling contract there, would certainly make my life an awful lot easier, you know.
Yeah, is there anything else from the rest of you that would make that kind of planning stage and the initial process more easy?
I think one of the things that's been hard is that the Arts Council has been trying to figure out, particularly in circus, because it's such a growing art form, what makes sense to do, whether to do agility awards, project awards, and so we don't know year by year what we can even apply for. And so I think trying to, I know that's not an easy thing because we're trying to change it to make it work better, but actually having consistency year by year so that we can plan, so that we know we're going to be exhausted after the Fringe, and we know that application deadline, like just having even the dates of when things are going to be due much further ahead of time will allow people to plan. I think that's the...
Amazing, thank you. Okay, I'm going to have to end this half. I'm over time already. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. We are going to do some questions at the end that you can remember these guys for, and you can refer to them for some questions. But can I please welcome to the stage Marcel Vidal, Deirdre Griffin, Maija Makela, Jijo Sebastian, and Noel O'Regan. Thank you.
Watch for me to wave.
Okay. Yeah, take a seat. Huh? So, like I said earlier, in the second part of the conversation, we're going to move the conversation a little bit further, and we're going to be talking about completing work and the final stages of making it work, which is often when we present or when we deliver the project. And I know, because we are from different disciplines, that means different things to each of us. So again, just really quickly to start off, and starting with you down the end there, Maija, maybe you can just say your name, tell me a little bit about your practice, what you do, and maybe your intention when you were applying to Next Gen as well. Thank you.
My name is Maija. I work through music and writing, and like the performance of these things. When I was applying to the Next Generation, I was working like as a nanny, and I was working in a shop, as well as like trying to pursue my arts practice. So I was just like deeply exhausted all the time and didn't have, we're just constantly worrying about money. And then, so I just, wanted to give myself the space, or I wanted the award to like give me the space to like quit my other jobs and, have some days off so I could think and daydream, which I think is, daydreaming is essential to making anything. So I needed that time. And it gave me that, so yeah.
Great. Jijo?
My name is Jijo Sebastian. I'm a socially engaged filmmaker. I received that one in 2015. I don't exactly remember why I applied. But I remember it was one of the first applications because I was making films since 2008. But I never knew that there were funding available for these kind of activities. And then I got directed to an agency, and I applied, and I received an award. Then I thought, okay, that's good. So I apply again. That's why I applied to Next Generation, and I received that too. But then I used that money to make a film 2 years after that. So that's my story.
Yeah, thank you. Noel?
Yeah, my name is Noel O'Regan, writer of the 2023 cohort. Like when I applied, it had been quite a strange few months in that I'd lost my job as an editor and I'd started freelancing. So again, there was precarity and worry about making a living and all that. I did then also just get a book deal so which helped a tiny bit towards that. But so by the time I found that I got accepted, it was a huge relief in that it gave me time, to work on the edits of that book, which still needed a bit of work, build towards future projects, and just even have the time to kind of get my head around the fact that, you know, after years of working towards it, I'd have a book coming out, you know, the following year, this year. So it was a huge relief.
Hi, my name is Deirdre Griffin, and I'm a dancer. I also work in circus as well, with mostly handstands and a little bit of aerial, but mostly handstands. And I applied for the Next Generation. I suppose I work a lot on other people's projects, and I am really looking forward to the beginnings of making something new. The last show I made was a solo show, and I'm looking more to kind of work, more with groups, just really having the time and space to do that. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Marcel Vidal. I'm a painter and sculptor, and I was awarded the Next Generation in 2019. It was at a time where momentum had started to build within my practice, and I got taken on by a gallery, Curling Gallery Dublin. So it also was coming up to the time where we had COVID, so a lot of my original application didn't come to fruition, but I did in end result having a solo show with the Curling Gallery, which the money helps support me to do.
Thanks so much. So Noel, I wanted to come to you first because I know we've been talking a lot about working alone, and then we're talking now about bringing a project to completion, and often that comes with it meeting an audience. So I'm interested in speaking to your experience around what that's like in making it work, like when it comes to bringing a written work to an audience. And I know there's events that need to happen, there's kind of maybe speaker tours that you might be doing. How do you kind of navigate that in your own practice?
Yeah, to start off, I'd say it's terrifying. I would classify myself as very introverted, and as a lot of writers are, I think. And so you spend 90 to 99% of your time basically as a hermit, alone in a room, making up characters and worlds. And then for this other 1%, suddenly if you're lucky enough to get published, you have to turn into a salesperson for your work. And I think traditionally there isn't much prep done for you, like with that stuff. Like I know I had a lot of anxiety around that. Like I had to do my first radio interview, went on TV. Even this, like I only had my first panel event last weekend, so it's been a stressful few weeks. It's exciting too. It's exciting. I want to stress, but it's all new, and I've been told it gets easier.
I don't know. I think I was wondering about that a lot because I think for a lot of us, like for me, like developing work is like so joyous, and working in a private room is so great, and then suddenly when people are coming and they've bought tickets, it's kind of mortifying, and I'm very afraid. And sectorally, I don't think we do support each other a lot when it comes to negotiating these live moments before audiences. And I think there's more that we could be doing to help each other. I'm wondering, does any of that resonate for you, Maija? But I'm also wondering too, around the stages of completing work for someone like you, because obviously you make albums and you perform the work live. When does it start to feel done, or do you feel like you're always in kind of a loop of completing?
It feels done, like the music feels done in a way after the writing has taken place, and that's like the first stage of completion. That's like the most compelling part for me. Like everyone else who's been speaking, I do all my work alone, and necessarily the idea of trying to write to a witness, I don't know how people do that, or a collaborator, a witness, I don't know.
It's a witness.
But then, the music world is very slow, like it's very delayed, particularly if at the moment if you release music on vinyl, because there's a lacquer shortage in the world and only 2 vinyl pressing plants in Europe, and Fleetwood Mac did a big, huge 8 million copy reissue of Rumours. So I had to wait over a year after submitting my album to be mastered for it to be released into the world. So it feels very done to me now.
Yeah.
And then, you know, making that public or performing that can feel really fulfilling as well, but it's a different thing, and often by the time you get to actually perform the music, my head is already elsewhere, I think. So.
And if your head is already elsewhere, like how do you navigate the performance? Like, is there any kind of approach that you have?
Learn dissociation. Often,
We're all on that piece, I think. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Wondering, Marcel, around for you, like within the visual art context, when it comes to completing a work, obviously you're probably engaging with a space and with a curator. What is that kind of conversation like?
Yeah, like it starts early on and knowing where the gallery space is, and then in the studio I'll be alone and I'll develop the ideas, and there'll be conversations that will occur in that process. But a lot of time I'm responding to the architecture of the space, and that'll also dictate then how I build sculptures, or maybe thinking about imagery that I might display in the space. A lot of time then when I do get to that point where it's time to exhibit, you know, I've made the plan, it's mapped out in my mind, I find that I build it, but I don't come to understand it till afterwards. So I become the viewer once it's established what it is. So I might be pulling all these connection points between, you know, maybe the space is a space of authority, you know, then I'm looking at images of authority. So like I'll be pulling all these different reference points in together to create environments or installations, and a lot of time I'm not quite fully clear on what the outcome of that, and I try not to over project my personal self into the work as well. So that's why I do operate within the architecture of space in that way. Say my solo show in the Curling Gallery, that would be a good example of me understanding the space and knowing the space and thinking about the space in terms of how can I work in a gallery space that's white walls, that's very recognisable to a lot of people in the visual arts scene. You know, you enter from below up into this kind of no windowed space, but I have like been to that space a lot. I've understood the architecture of it, and I've then considered it, and I go, there's a window hidden behind one of these white walls. So for me, opening that window becomes a sculpture. It brings light into space. It changes our relationship to the space. And then I start to look up as well to the ceiling, and it's got a long strip. I painted the strip in the ceiling yellow, and then I bring the sculptural element of my practice in through the painting of that. And then that allowed me to focus in on making a show that is about painting, but also dealing again with light and shadow and different elements that the space itself starts to talk to. So I created imagery that was related to canopies, looking into space, but this was also coming out of the time of COVID as well. So the show was called Stuck on Dawn, so it had this kind of strange energy to walk into a space that is kind of like what a gallery is about, presenting a commodity in a sense. But when you open that window in that space, it totally took it apart. It disrupted that space. And for me, I'm always disrupting spaces. And in previous work, I would have done that in a very bombastic and aggressive way. And this was something that changed, and it changed through having the next generation and the space and COVID happening, in that my relationship to my own practice changed. I became more disciplined in my time, and I became less anxious to always be doing something bigger and better.
Okay, yeah. Amazing. So so you're talking there a lot about like, so your process begins alone, and then there's like, when you're moving into the space, there's quite a lot of response that's happening with the architecture of the space. Sure. And that's how you're moving towards your conclusion, which is quite interesting. Yeah. And I'm interested then in, obviously people come to meet the work. People come into that space that you've occupied. Within that visual art context and within what you've set up, how is their feedback or their conversation, how do you experience that, I suppose, as the artist?
I experience it in a very open way, in that I try not to tint it with my own personal relationship to the work, and I let them speak. I feel that I'm making references to my experience of life. Sometimes they're quite ambiguous, sometimes they're not. I don't need to put all of myself into that work in that way. You know, I've made works that contain a relationship to my father passing, my house being flooded. You could walk in and you don't know that. And that's okay. That I use the symbolism that for some people, like say a flower could represent morbidity, to other people it's joyful. For me, flowers represent that darkness, death, but then also flowers bear witness to my father, who at the time was sick and was on oxygen, you know, and then the flowers producing. It's cleansing the air. So there was this relation. But for me, and the raw experience as a viewer, it's not important for me to input that on them. Mm-hmm. It's more about engaging and taking people out of, say, the space that they've come from and making them refocus, but it's not about dictating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very interesting because there's a giving of yourself and then there's this kind of like disassociation again, which just helps you actually in the final stages of it, which I think is really, really nice and very generous to audiences. Jijo, I'm interested in talking to you around your filmmaking practice because I know that you work very specifically with communities. So when you're engaged in a filmmaking practice with communities over time, obviously it's all about the relationships. So in the final stages of a process and the conclusion part, I'm wondering, how do you hold the work and the relationships in tandem? Can you speak to that? I know it's probably quite broad.
No, yeah, socially engaged. Art itself is about relationships and maybe building communities. So I think almost every project I was involved in, I hope to think that I left a community behind when I left the project, and a community to which I am connected always. May not be the case all the time, but I worked mostly with communities, or let's say small communities from my own Indian community when I started out. So I kind of almost knew them. So there was a relationship already in place. But then we kind of formed a film society. I mean, there was organizations in which I helped form, and it helped a lot of productions before I started getting funding. But then I moved on into other multicultural communities. Actually, one of the artists I worked with on our project is right here. And then after every project, for example, in that project, we still kind of meet up. One of the participants even comes over whenever he's in Dublin. He comes over with the whole family and stays with me. I mean, so that relationship is very, it's gone over to a friendship level. That's how it, but at the same time, film as such is a very popular art form, so everybody has very strong opinions and everybody has a favorite film. So during the collaboration process, it's always difficult to make the participants know that everybody has to leave their position aesthetically and politically and meet somewhere where they may not be completely happy. I think I always say that the end product will be something which nobody will be completely happy with, but everybody will be kind of happy with. I mean, then we collaborated. That means we just left our position and we met somewhere and we made something. So
yeah, that's interesting because you're talking about kind of setting the expectation very clearly when working within the community context, which I think is really, really important. Deirdre, coming back to that piece around feedback and hearing back at the end of a process for you, what has your experience been? And how do you approach feedback? What's necessary for you? Or what's useful for you?
Well, I think during the process of making something, I think having showing the work to people it's good for even for your own feedback. When you perform something in front of people or your work, you're like, oh, that's actually not it. It's something else that I'm trying to convey, and that I think being able to do that a few times during your process, you kind of get more of an idea of what your idea really is. Like, you'd have an idea in your head, but once you do it physically, then you really, you can actually see if it's if it's really the thing, really the idea. So that feedback for yourself, and then I know, like, after my solo show, the show was called Soup. It was about grief. And after the show, we had like a just like, you know, wine and whatever, some nibbles outside the performance. And it was a really kind of amazing space because people wanted to talk about their own grief. So it opened up this space. It was just the one theatre that provided it afterwards. And then I was kind of like, oh, this should have been part of, you know, all of the shows, especially because I'm masked during most of the show. So, and also, you know, if you perform on stage and the audience are, you know, in the darkness, so that space when you come outside just to speak to them afterwards or to get that feedback is really important. Yeah. Yeah,
so we were talking about kind of the idea of like a container space that's not even just feedback, but like a continuation of the conversation that's begun while we're watching the work afterwards.
Yeah.
And do you think that's something that you'd be interested in progressing further as you move into the future of your practice? I know you were saying it just happened in one place on the last show.
Well, I think it's like thinking about the space before you go in to see a show and afterwards. And then it also depends on the type of work that you're making. I imagine like that could be considered more how you know, actualise that. But it was really like, yeah, kind of why didn't I do that for all of the shows? Because people really, they wanted to talk about their own, like they just brought up loads of stuff for them, and then just to hear back as well. Like, I mean, it was, yeah, so, yeah.
Amazing, thanks Deirdre. I think we have time for one or two questions, and bearing in mind as well that there are artists on the stage and artists in the front as well that just spoke about their approaches across beginning and ending their processes. Is there anything anybody would like to ask? Anyone? You've given them all the information they need. Oh no, we've got one down there. If you want to just wait for the mic. Yeah.
I suppose one question is particularly in taking in consideration application writing and stuff, when we're talking about the time spent in building the work, but what about the time afterwards where the burnout happens and we need those weeks off? And I'm thinking of that particularly when you were saying like what's something that we could do about applications, and you know, like a rolling deadline is really great, but also giving a nugget of time for rest and restoration and reflection. And I'm just wondering, to any of the artists that have thus been on, do they consider that when working with an institution or an organisation or with the Arts Council or so on, about how do you approach giving yourself the time to rest? Yeah.
You don't mean, do you mean in terms of being funded as well? To have the rest, do you think like there should be a...
Yeah, I actually really do. Yeah, I really
like
do.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I've known from artists, say, that are more established, that they seem to go on holidays, like literally the day after a show opens. They just leave, so they don't have to think about it. So it's very hard to implement it, but I think it's good to just detach that time, to get away from that space, that you're not even thinking to go in and look at this space. Because I think that can be a challenge if you live in the same city as where the work is. So it is really hard to disconnect, to stop thinking, to stop talking. You know, stop communicating with your partner even about it. It's like it becomes so all-encompassing that there is like, yeah, you could be there at 10 o'clock at night and the show is over and you're still talking about it. But it doesn't matter anymore. You know, and that also then leads to, if you do get caught in those, sorry, I'm going to take up the space, but that feeling of then you become self-critical, but then you also start to see the space becomes a vacuum. And you've put all this work in maybe for a year, maybe it's been 6 solid months, pushing that work, building, investing in resources, spending the money that you have available maybe to do nice things, and then it's a vacuum, because what do you expect an audience to give back to? Do you know? So like for me, I would always try to see the exhibition as an experiment for the next experiment, so that there's still space to create more space, to move on to the next stage. So that idea of relaxation and research makes a lot of sense and should be maybe another, for me anyway. So.
Yeah, the Recovery Award, we can call it, now that the next gen is gone. Guys, I'm really sorry, but we have to leave that there because I'm a little out of time. I'm being called off the stage from the wings. Thank you so much to our brilliant panellists for sharing some of their process with us, and thank you to those in the audience. We're going to move on now to our final performance of today, and it's from Edwina Guckian. Edwina Guckian is a traditional dancer, greatly influenced by the history and style of local music she grew up with across Leitrim and Roscommon. Edwina belongs to the 2017 Next Generation Award cohort. She's accompanied today by the incomparable David Munnelly. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everyone. We're nearly there. That was we won't hold you too long. So my Next Generation award came in 2017, right at a time where I was a primary school teacher and left in 2014 on a year's career break to go dancing with Dave and lots of other people. And when 2016, 2017 came, my career break had finished and I had to look at going back. So I was on that fence of, do I or don't I? And then the Next Generation came along and I haven't been back in school since. So it was great. Exactly what I needed at the right time. So my name's Edwina and this is Dave Munnelly from Belmullet. And I would be best known, I guess, as a dancer in Leitrim. The older generation would say, oh, you're the girl that's great for knocking sparks. And that is one of the really old things that the people would say about people dancing on the old flagstones years ago with the hobnail boots. When they would dance, the metal on their shoes would warm up and they'd knock sparks out of the flags. So I grew up not having any specific day that I started dancing. It was just a way of life. You learn to walk and talk, lilt a tune, dance a few steps. And it wasn't ever a performance thing. So most people would expect me, actually one of the most common questions I get is who do you tour with? And I don't. I dance on my own with musicians. So I've never been in that competitive world or world where people dance collectively together in performance. I've been dancing with people all my life, but in a social setting. And that's how my family would have grown up, playing music and singing and dancing just as a way of life in a very informal setting. So some of the people that I would have seen that had the biggest influence on me, they would never teach you or pull you out onto the floor and say, this is how you do it. They just dance and you'd have to learn by watching and listening and pick it up yourself and make your own of it. And that's kind of the secret of this style of dancing is copying somebody, but then it becomes your own because you make your own of it. So my grandfather would always say, close your eyes, feel the rhythm of the person dancing and try imitate their steps then when they're in your body. So my Next Generation award was all about reconnecting music and dance because over time, how we learn to dance, like the way I learned to dance in the house, and my grandfather played the fiddle, and there was all these people coming to dance and play music with them, and just in general, a kind of a rambling house. All those people that I had watched growing up that influenced me had all passed away by the time I was 10, 12. So it was kind of a way of life that was gone by the time I was turning into a teenager. And also the situation for people in general playing and dancing together. So if you wanted to learn to dance today, you go to dance classes. If you want to learn to play the box, you go to an accordion class. And the situation of learning together with music and dance had disappeared. So the connection between music and dance had disappeared. So if I was to, through no fault of their own, if I was to put a child out dancing today and said, hop up there and dance a few steps, if you started tapping your foot for them before the music started, they'd start. They'd just take off rather than listening to the tune. So, and it's the same. It's really good fun to dance to a musician who doesn't really play for dancers, and sometimes they won't even like look at you because you're so distracting for them. But then it's really good fun if you dance with someone who grew up playing for dancers. A really good example of that that's really well known is Cormac Begley. Cormac Begley makes you want to dance, and that's because he grew up playing for dancers. So you'll know straight away who plays for dancers and who doesn't. And the challenge of dancing to somebody like Dave is that they'll throw stuff at you and you have to be able to respond, and vice versa. I can throw something at Dave and he has to be able to respond. So the whole idea of reconnecting the connection between music and dance was a massive part, and looking at the situations where people used to dance, which I'll tell you more about later. So we're going to dance the Ships Are Sailing. Ships Are Sailing, and I've no idea what I'm going to do. And that's the secret of sean-nós dancing. So if I've no idea, you've no idea, so it must be right. So we have like little pieces within the tune that I know Dave's going to throw at me, but other than that, it can either go really well or really wrong.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you. Keep at it. Keep at it. The connection between the musician and the dancer is very important. It's, as Edwina said, it's not something that's always taken into consideration. So a lot of time, the musician or the dancer is working on numbers. They have their own inbuilt metronome that's always in time to them, because they set it that way. And it's growing up myself, I'm from the west of Ireland, province of Newfoundland, County Mayo. And I grew up in she mentioned a very interesting thing about the Rambling House, where people come in to our house on a Sunday. My grandmother was one of 13 children who played the melodeon, and she had 9 brothers who played fiddle. And she was the only melodeon player. And next to them, she talked about her cousins, who had 6 fiddle players. So between 2 houses, they had 15 fiddle players and 1 melodeon player. There's not 15 fiddle players nearly in the county now, never mind in a small village. But she talked about the Rambling House, and about the older the house, the better, was a comment she used to always say. And talked about this flagstone that was in front of the hearth. It was purposely put in there. And that's where, because the houses were small, we couldn't fit, the front scene of river dance in the kitchen of the house or in front of the flagstone. So it was a 2 or a 4 person dance, or sometimes a solo person. someone to get up and just move randomly. You know, it was no Fred Astaire anyway, I tell you that. And but the power of that kind of continued into our modern house, we'd say, where my grandmother would always comment, "That's not the same. It's not the same." Why, Gran? Why is it not the same? Well, it's lino. It's lino, and that's it. And the idea of sparks, the idea of energy, can be really muffled down by lino. It really can. There's one more story I'll continue with, but it happened in our kitchen. My grandmother was kind of well known locally for being just a crazy musician and a lover of music. And there was an American cousin over from the States, of course, that's why they were American, but they came into the house anyway, an English Yank, and they came in and they went up to an uncle of mine who played the accordion, and he was kind of well on it at this stage now. He was kind of, how was the, inebriated, maybe he was drunk, and he was there playing away and trying to keep awake. And these rambling houses went on. They started like after breakfast and they lasted till Wednesday. You know, they kept going, and this American cousin came up and said to my uncle, "Do you know San Francisco?" She said, and he said, well if you start it, I'll follow you." So they're the rambling houses, and but the importance of getting together, the social aspect, people, humour, drink, socialising, and life, yeah.
Thanks, Dave. The bullet from Belmullet. And you can see there as well, it's actually not a performance dance at all. I have my back to you, and it's out of no disrespect for you for a lot of the dance. It's because it's kind of a conversation between the two of us. So it's really uncomfortable for me sometimes when there's a wonderful band playing on stage and then I have to dance out here with my back to them. And it'd be like me sitting here talking to you looking that way. It's really uncomfortable, so it's very much a conversation. But a part of that Next Generation anniversary as well was to look at the situations people danced in, and it had such a knock-on effect through all my work for the past few years. So I'll just put on this for you here. So I'm just, on the 1st of February coming, I'm launching a book thanks to the Arts Council and Brian Layden from Lepus Print. And it's a book about Irish folklore, customs and traditions from my own point of view, looking at all of those dance situations like the house dance or the crossroads dance, or stories just like Dave telling stories here. They all play a role in our culture. So I've collected all of them, and the idea is to be able to empower children to read them, to discover them, and this is what your grandparents or your ancestors were doing, and to go find your own. So I'm hoping it'll be a key to unlock loads of stories within their families, and that they'll be able to document their own and have their own. So a lot of these are my own stories, really personal to me, but they're unanimous, like right across, so you'll find them everywhere. So I'll just show you really quickly some of the slides. So that's the cover there. It's a crossroads dance that I organise all the time every year in Effrina in County Leitrim, where people just come out, we light a fire, a few musicians show up, and suddenly the whole community starts coming at us from 4 crossroads, and they're all there to sing and dance and play music. And then stories, if you're familiar with this one, the 1st of March, which is the day the crows start building their nest. Have you heard that one? It's, the day the crow starts building their nest, if it falls on a Sunday, they'll wait till Monday. And Nullig the Man, that's becoming really popular and coming back again. The Wren Boys. So in this piece, I just tell children how to dress, what you can wear. There's no rules. And the concept of going from house to house, playing music and singing and dancing, and how they can set up their own. And on Ihe Arnoch, which we're coming up to, which I thought might be a nice one to tell you about, the last night of Samhain. So my grandfather used to always say, as I left his house to run up to our own in the dark, on the last night of November, he'd say, be careful because the dead are dancing in the hills tonight before they head back into the other world again. And if they recognise you as one of the living, they'll keep you. So we're going dancing in the hills of Leitrim this 30th of November, if anybody wants to join us. So that's the book there. And part of that then is there's children making, I teach at a club called Art Dance, the Culture Club, which is like a huge bucket of music, song, dance, folklore, Irish language, and the children are like dunked in it and culturized in a non-competitive sense, and then they create things in whatever path they want to travel. So at the moment there's loads of them just coming to the end of taking things from the book and then creating videos about them to be able to share with other children. So I'm going to go back to those house dances where loads of this came out of, and from me gathering it from older generation people. And I'm just going to tell you about how everybody danced years ago. Whether you were good at it or not, it did not matter. Everybody got up and danced. So I'm going to teach you a really quick dance to finish you off, just to kill you before the end of the day. So can everybody just find a space and ask somebody to dance with you?
No.
And if you don't have a partner and you'd like somebody to dance with you, put your los in there. If anyone needs a partner, put up your hand. All right, there's 4 parts to this dance. And I learned this one at a house dance when I was about maybe 7. My grandfather was playing for the house dance, and this wonderful man called Sonny Moffat taught me how to do the clap dance. So, face your partner. And we're going to go this 3 times. Knees, clap, hands 3 times. Ready? 2, 3. And knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands, and stop there. Just 3 times. So your full piece looks like this. Knees, clap, 1. Knees, clap, 2. Knees, clap, 3. Clap, hands, clap, hands. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands, clap, hands, clap, hands. Brilliant. Well done. Part 2. You've got part 1 done. Part 2, we're going to cross. So rather than do a knees clap, 2 hands like this, you're going to knees clap, cross, and give a high 5. Knees clap, cross. Knees clap, cross, clap, cross, clap, cross. And 1, 2, 3, car. And knees clap, cross. Knees clap, cross. Knees clap, cross, clap, cross, clap, cross. Good. Now we're going all the way to 14. So this part's really easy. We just do clap a hein, a do, a 3. And when we get to 14, 13, 14, 3 high 5s. Ready? Clap a hein, a do, a 3, a car, a cúig, a sé, a sha, a hup, a knee, a je, a hein, dig, a do, ye. 3 jig, car jig, 1, 2, 3. Good. Shake your partner's hand. Don't let go. And you're going to shuffle around, and when you're finished and you feel like you've done enough shuffling around, you just give each other the wink to kind of acknowledge, we'll stop here now. Ready? Shuffle around. 2, 3, hop, 1. And 2, round in a circle. 3, 4, 5, 6, don't forget to wink. 7, and stop. And now the final part of the dance here is where you show off. So you get to face your partner, and like, usually we shuffle, like we do some steps with our feet, but in today's world, like, the kids do that thing, you know, that thing, and all sorts. So you can do, this is your chance to show off. And remember, don't be worried about who's looking at you, because everyone's too busy figuring out what they're doing themselves, okay? Just give it welly. So we'll go one more time from the beginning, then we'll try it to music. Ready? 2, 3, and knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands, clap, hands, clap, hands. Cross, knees, clap, cross. Knees, clap, cross. Knees, clap, cross, clap, cross. Keep going. Clap behind. A do, a 3, car, cúig, a sé, a sha, a hup, a knee, a je, hein, dig, a do, ye. 3 J, car J, dance around. Hop, 1, 2, 3, hop. Now. All right. Are you ready to go? We're going to get an intro. 1, 2, 3, hop. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap, hands, cross. Knees, clap, cross. Knees, clap, cross. Knees, clap, cross, cross. Keep going. Clap behind. Do, 3, car, cúig, sé, sha, hop, knee, je, hein, dig, do, 3 J, car jig, 1, dance around. Hop, woo! Now face your partner. Ready? Show off. Off you go. Woo! Okay, one more time. Ready? Knees. Knees, clap, hands. Knees, clap. Knees, clap, cross. Knees, clap, cross. Hain, do, three, car, cooey, shake, shop, hop, knee. Dance around. Woo! Dance around. And now show off to finish. Hup. Woo! Don't forget, it's terribly rude not to thank your partner for dancing with you. Thanks for dancing. Okay, we're going to finish off. But just before we finish off, isn't it good fun? Yeah, everybody should be doing it. So, which brings me on to my next and final piece is, this is what happened all the time, like for my grandparents and even my parents' generation, like everybody just danced all the time. It wasn't a performance thing. It was just about, let's get together in each other's houses and have a bit of crack. There's a good musician in the area that might play for us, whatever. So house dances were a massive thing. And sometimes like people didn't organize them. They just kind of happened by accident. And sometimes some houses were really well known for being like the house where the musicians are. We'll all go there. But in 1935, a dance act was brought in called the 1935 Dance Hall Act. And when that was brought in, it was a law that made it illegal to dance at a house dance, organise a crossroads dance. If you didn't have a license, you were brought to court. You were arrested and brought to court. And it's still in our constitution today. So bring on the referendum. I'm not joking. So it had a huge impact on us not dancing in each other's houses today. So it had lots of things that instigated it. Like it was mainly church and state, but the church played a huge role in this. And when this time 100 years ago in the Roaring 20s, when jazz started to, come into Ireland and move into Irish music, and our dancing suddenly wasn't as formal and graceful as it should be because people were doing foxtrots. Like I have a quote from a priest on Arranmore Island who was given out from the pulpit saying, "Let the fox trot, but don't trot after him." So there's great stuff, like it's amazing. So this is part of my Markovich Award that I've started in the past few weeks that is going to take me through next year. And it's looking at the implications of that 35 Dance Hall Act on dance and also on women, because it was used then as a missile to look at women and how they're socializing, how they're dressing, how they're dancing, and crazy stuff like women been totally denounced from the altar because they wore their sleeves above their elbows, or because they were wearing lipstick, or crazy things. So I'd love to go back if I could and cause so much trouble. But so it's a really interesting period. But the dance halls, the house dances really suffered because of it. So part of ongoing work is to try recreate those situations for children through the book, or just organising things in my local community to bring people together to dance in places where people always danced but don't dance anymore. And I'm telling you, they're the best nights. There's barely anything involved in them. Any of you could organise them. Just have a house dance, organise some musicians, and put a shout out to your friends and tell them that you're going to do the clap dance and all sorts in your kitchen for a night. So we're going to finish off with a tune called The Pride of Petrovore, which is a song that was written by Percy French. And it's just got that kind of jazzy element into it. Lindy Hop plays a role in it, and swing and all the trouble from that time. I grew up in Effrina, just beside Jimmy Gralton's dance hall. So the history of that kind of, when you live in a place like that where the hall was basically closed in the 1930s and Jimmy Gralton was deported for lots of reasons, but one of them was for teaching swing dance and encouraging people to gather together in a hall that was owned by the community rather than the church. And living in that land, I guess, and still feeling spirits around there has really pushed me into the 1935 Dance Hall Act and trying to get people back to Effrina and dancing again, especially doing some Lindy and swing. So we'll give it a go. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Edwina and Dave. What a totally exhilarating way to bring a close to what's been a really fantastic day of discussion. I'm Monica Corcoran. I'm from the Strategic Development Department of the Arts Council, and I was involved in the Programme Advisory Committee for this great event today. And it has been a truly inspirational day, and I've been given the very pleasant task of thanking people before Shaun draws his final conclusions on the day. So there's a huge number of people who have made this event possible, but if I were to read out every name, we'd be here for quite some time. So please, if you're referenced in the collective, please be assured that the Arts Council is really grateful to each and every person who's contributed to this event today and all the work it represents. We wish to thank our guest speakers today, led out at the outset by Minister Martin, and all our panellists and chairs, and our fabulous host, Shaun Dunne, who has really effortlessly guided us through the whole day. We'd also like to thank all our performers and creators who so richly brought the Next Generation programme to life in this room today, and to our podcasters, and whose issue I'm certainly very much looking forward to hearing. We want to thank all the Next Generation artists who have inspired, moved, challenged, and just simply wowed us. And the strategic funded partner organisations, the venues and festivals who've supported, platformed and promoted the work of these artists, and particularly the Tyrone Guthrie Centre, which has been mentioned a few times today in Anna Makela, who have really welcomed and supported all artists over the years. And we'd also like to thank directors and heads of schools who've supported the programme too. We'd like to acknowledge the members of the Programme Advisory Committee who are staff at the Arts Council and our colleagues in the department. And I'd like to particularly call out sometimes unseen people at the Arts Council who've worked tirelessly over the years to conceive of and deliver the entire arts programme around the decade of centenaries. And that's Liz Meany, Stephanie O'Callaghan and Gillian Drew, as well as the staging of this closing events. And thanks also here to our comms team, particularly Joey Kavanagh and Sarah O'Keefe for their work on this event. We'd very much like to thank the staff of MCO, particularly Tom Lorden, Shruti Nair and Caoimhín Corrigan, who have invested so much effort and energy in bringing this day to fruition. For the actual technical staging of the event today, thanks to the staff at Dublin Castle, including AV staff, Creative Technologies and CAVS. Thank you to our sign language interpreter today, who come from Bridge Interpreting. And thanks also to tonight's catering staff, who looked after us so well today. Special thanks also to Davis event staff, including Sarah Morrissey and Ben Rowe. Almost finally, thanks to Niamh Dumphy and Roisin Kybert for their work on the commemorative publication. And we'll be sending out an invite to everyone here to the launch of that publication some evening in February, in the new year. And finally, and most importantly, sincerest thanks once again to each and every Next Generation artist awardee, without whom none of this would have taken place. We look forward with huge anticipation to your future creative journeys. Thank you. Hand you back to Shaun now.
Hello again. I'm not going to try and add any more contribution. I think the contributions from today spoke very clearly for themselves. Thank you to the Arts Council. Thank you to the department. Congratulations and keep going to all of the artists. And please remember, everyone, that there will be a publication launch about these awards early next year in 2024. So hopefully we can all meet there again. So congrats and thank you. Goodbye.